Hey, welcome back to the Ra INtuition channel or podcast, whatever you're listening to this on, either YouTube or any major podcast. So I forgot that in a couple of my videos. So it was just like the channel. Oh yeah, I put it on the podcast too. So welcome back. And if this is your first time, welcome to my channel where I talk about anything and everything astrology because it's my channel and I do what I want. And that's what I want to do. So here we go. So this is my video on how astrology found me because like the great Chris Brennan, or I don't know if he said it, but I hear him say it all the time, that astrology, you don't find astrology finds you. So if you don't know what astrology is, it just found you. So anyways, without getting into too much detail of my life, so that this video isn't too long, I might extend it and do one later if like this video has people wanting to know more information about it. But anyways, I'm gonna try to keep this short. I'm not good at that. I'm gonna try it today. So basically, I was raised with my grandmother who was Christian and also my mother who was a religious adventurer. I like that. I just made that up right now. So, which I really love that about her. I mean, I think when I was younger, I was a little confused by it a little bit, but there was one thing that she taught me was that never to, she taught me how to be diverse and how to learn different cultures. And that was one thing that my mother was very, very great at doing, was accepting any and everyone, no matter what color they were, what religion they were, anything like that. So she wasn't to. We did go to like different kinds of churches and stuff, and we went to different kinds of religion. And so one of the places she liked to go to was the local bookstore, and it was like a new age bookstore, and she was really into that stuff, and she would study that along with other religions. So I guess I get all of this from her. And so she never studied astrology though. I probably knew my sun sign. I don't remember, but they probably talked about it, and I probably knew I was a Cancer, and that was about it. And my grandma didn't talk about that stuff at all, but she never really said anything against it either. I don't remember her commenting about it. And she was very influential. She was my main caretaker till she passed away when I was 11. And so when that happened, I ran away from home because my home life became very unsafe. It had been unsafe for a few reasons, but my grandma was like a safe haven. So when I didn't have that anymore, I was staying with multiple friends and having sleepovers. So a lot of their parents thought, and also like probably people I shouldn't have been staying with. And so anyways, what I would do, because I tried to go to school as a runaway. Like, who does that, right? Like, come here. So I tried to go to school as a runaway, and the counselor actually came up to me and was like, "I'm really sorry, but I have to tell your mom that you're here." And that will give you an idea of maybe like how bad things were, that the counselor came and warned me that my mom was coming. And so it was a rough time of my life, and I was really trying to understand what was happening in my life, what was happening with the people and my loved ones in my life. And so instead of going to school when my friends went to school, because I ran away from there, I fled, and I went to the local library, and I went to the pseudoscience section, and I hid in the like adult bookstore area, and for some reason nobody questioned it. So I don't know, I just kind of minded my own business and I didn't bother anyone, and I conducted myself. Like, who would suspect that it's an 11-year-old going and reading all of the books in the pseudoscience section? Like, I mean, I don't know, I guess. So that's what I would do. And I looked at books like numerology and just all kinds of stuff. But I found a few books on astrology, and there was something about it that just resonated with me. And I was never one to just like, oh my God, this is true. And I still don't do that to this day. I still don't do it. I still question everything too much, like almost to a fault. So don't think that I just like was like, oh my God, this is real and I had an epiphany. No, that's not what happened. But there was something about it that was so interesting and so fascinating. And it was really helping me understand how people operate, how things work, how like the laws of nature. And it was teaching me the laws of nature through all the archetypal properties and stuff. So I read a bunch of sun sign books, and I did that, and I kept those, and I didn't return them to the library. So don't do that. But like, so anyways, I, obviously was moving around. I went through CPS, then I went to a whole bunch of different kinds of churches, had some interesting religious experiences in the churches. That, I mean, nothing like horrible. I just remember going into like whoever was the staff on the weekend took us to whatever church they wanted, and the staff rotated weekends. So I went to a different church every weekend. And so when I went to one of the churches, there was like all this singing and praising, and you could like feel the soul, you could feel the spirit in the room. They were just like empowered. There was a beautiful choir of gospel music, and it was like an experience that gave me goosebumps. Like, I just loved it. And then I went to a couple other ones, and it was, they read real monotone. It was kind of boring, but they were chill. They were good people. I wasn't mad about it. I was like, I could dig this, and it's fine, and then we went to another church, and that church had a Starbucks in it, and was like ginormous, and had all these screen TVs. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with Starbucks. It is there. But like, I don't know. But it being in the church was like a red flag for me. And then all of the massive amount of like big screen TVs and just the extravagance of it was kind of a red flag for some reason. And then, which, I mean, that's all good. If you want to have a nice church, you can have a nice church. But then it wasn't even like, oh, let's talk about God for a little bit. It was like they put on the big screen TVs this infomercial of like, give all your money to the church. And it was this family, and they were saying how they only had $500 left, and they didn't know how they were going to pay the bills. They didn't know what they were going to do. And then they gave that $500 to the church, and then they won the lottery because they gave all the rest of their money to God. And I kind of lost it. Like, I was just like, this place is ridiculous. And there's a lot worse church stories, but that was just my like, me as a child trying to process like, what is this religion? What is this? And it really always came down to that it's who's delivering it, because you are your spirituality, you are your church. There was a girl that I don't know if she was okay with me sharing, but she would do this poem called Your Temple. Your body is your temple, like the Holy Land is where you stand. And I love that. Her name was Carvette Redmond. I think she's okay with me sharing that. So anyways, so she would do those poems and stuff. And I feel like that really is a good example of what I mean by what I'm saying. And that was the lessons I learned from going and having so many different experiences, because no matter where I went, they would call their same God, but they were doing different things. And that's the same with astrology. And so no matter if you're into New Age, or you're into witchcraft, or you're into Buddhism, or you're into occult, whatever, not a cult, there's a difference. cults are, there's something negative about a cult, right? So we definitely need to keep that in mind, is who you are learning from if you're going to learn astrology. And that was something that I like dug into my head. So I very much put like a safeguard on that, like, people use good things and powerful things and spirituality and God, because I believe in God, and people use those things to manipulate people and to do bad things. And astrology is no different. So it is a tool. Astrology is not a religion. It is not a belief. It is not a body. It's not a person. You don't praise astrology, okay? I like when people say that, astrology is God's blueprints of the universe. That resonates for me. And I want to know what resonates with you if you're watching this. Like, what do you think about that? Like, what resonates? That's like, I don't know, but those kind of conversations, they like fill up my soul and my spirit. And I want to talk about how we access it. And I use spirituality as a tool. I use astrology as a tool to access spirituality. And I usually use, when the Mormons would come and try to convert me, or whoever, Jehovah's Witnesses, whoever knocks on your door, whatever, would try to like come and recruit me. And I would just be like, well, are you willing to listen to my beliefs? And the answer was usually no, right? And so, but I would listen to them because I enjoy hearing. But if they did listen to me, I usually explain to them that I see religion as like food, right? Like at the core of it, there's carbohydrates and there's proteins and there's a ton of nutrients and omega fatty acids and whatever it is, right? And we all need those nutrients, and real spirituality is those nutrients. It is the part that makes you grow, that fuels you, that makes you feel full, right? And so that is what I seek in spirituality, is fullness, fulfillment. And it really depends, and there's a bunch of different ways to prepare those protein and carbohydrates. You can make a burger with the salad or French fries. You can make some sushi. You can make some tacos. I like tacos and I like sushi and pizza. You can make pizza. You can make so many different kinds of food that is, good and nutritious and has protein, has carbohydrates, has whatever, all the other stuff you need. I'm usually my nutrients better. But anyways, you get all your vitamins and all that stuff, right? And a good meal comes from us experimenting and knowing what works. So we learn what works by looking at the people who came before us and seeing what they ate and how they absorb their nutrients. Because we know if a culture sustained on those same nutrients for centuries and centuries, that it works. Like, we know that it will keep us alive. We know that it'll keep us healthy. If we see that it kept our ancestors healthy and continued to keep the generations healthy after that. So as we know in our culture, a lot of us know that there isn't a right way to get protein and carbohydrates, but there is a wrong way to get protein and carbohydrates. And a lot of times we water things down with processing and we put chemicals in there that's not healthy for our bodies. And we do a bunch of stuff to our food that wasn't around when our ancestors were eating these foods. Like pizza that you get from a fast pizza that was over processed, that's not going to give you the nutrients that like a handmade dough from healthy ingredients with fresh made tomato sauce and fresh cut mozzarella, like those are not going to give you the same nutrient dense value, because it's not there anymore. It's been processed out. And so religion and spirituality and tools like astrology and divination and numerology and all these things, they have processed a lot of the nutrients out of our spirituality. And so it's hard to get fulfillment if you eat food that's been over processed. You are hungry very quickly and you eat a lot of it, even though there's so many calories in it, even though it's so much, it doesn't fill you up. And so I learned at a very young age that was a thing. And so I went on to study astrology, and then I realized that maybe I wasn't interested in astrology. Maybe it was just because I was interested in psychology and I was interested in how people's brains work. And that is very, very true. And then I went to go study psychology, and I did that for a while. And I didn't go to I'm a certified behavioral health technician. I am a certified peer support counselor and trainer. I train peer supports. I worked with homeless youth for years and years and years. And I always kind of did astrology in the background. And I found my stuff online. I found Astro Cafe. I think when I was like 15, I found like Astro Cafe Astrology. I think it's Cafe Astrology. So that was like my first go-to one. Now there's lots of sites, astro.com, all this stuff. I use new professional apps now, which I'll get to. And I discovered YouTube videos. And I would, in my free time, sometimes I would go and study my friend's charts, and study my chart, and my boyfriend's chart, and my brother, my family, and their kids, and I would study everybody's charts. And so I would still kind of do that in the background, but really I was like, I'm not going to approach it like I believe in it. I'm just going to test and see if this works. And what are they talking about? What's this person talking about? And I went from astrologer to astrologer. I Googled all these articles. I've read thousands and thousands of articles. And I really like Astrology 42 and like Pixie, and there's a ton. But I also like, I found KRS for Vedic, which I'm a Placidus tropical astrologer, which is what we mostly study in the US. And then I found that cool Vedic astrologer. I like him. I still watch him a lot, and I study Vedic with him. And then I also studied whole sign with Chris Brennan. I guess like from his free podcast. And so those are some really good ones. Astrolata does tropical astrology, and she does switch to whole sign. She switches back and forth like Placidus, like I do. And I really like her because she brings a whole bunch of other people on. There's those, and the Divine Venus, I've been watching her for a long time too. So those are just the Divine Venus, Astrolata, and KRS were like ones that have been around for a very long time, and those were the ones that I had originally found. And there's so many more, and I can do like a whole little thing on that and do my favorites and do a description on it. But I'll do that in another video because I just want to get through the whole, like, this part. So I was finding all that, and I was working in the field, and none of that stuff works. The psychology, it doesn't work. Our healthcare system doesn't work. It works for some people, so I still recommend that people try a therapist, try getting a therapist, try getting a counselor, try and have those in addition. Get a life coach. I have a counselor. I have a an energy healer who's amazing. I have a life coach. I have astrologers. So I do a bunch of self-care stuff. I study self-care. I do a lot of the work, for myself. We live in a crazy time. I come from a crazy life. We all need somebody to process with. And that was one thing that astrology gave me that was very practical. And that's why I never got away from it, but because it always gave me something to come back to process. And I would always say, if, I had people in my life that were like, that's dumb. You don't really believe in that stuff, do you? And I would just be like, I don't really care if it's true. I don't really care if it's real. It helps, it's practical, and it helps me guide. Like, look at Mercury retrograde, for example, makes total sense it's a time to reevaluate and look through and make sure that you've done your oil change like 3 times. It happens 3 times a year. So that's like every 4 months. So how often do you need to do an oil change? If you don't do it and Mercury retrograde comes around, what could happen to your car, right? And so this is very practical information that, like, even if you don't believe that actually Mercury, and I don't believe that actually Mercury comes and it's like, I'm going to mess your technology up, or I'm going to make your boyfriend text you or something. But like, there is a synchronicity and kind of laws of the universe that we've been following for generations that makes sense. And it reminds us to celebrate the different energies and to acknowledge, and there's a timing for things that we found works better, that we found works. And to me, that made sense, regardless of how far you want to take its predictive ability. The fact that it allowed you to sit down and analyze every single part of yourself, because when you really get into astrology, you learn that you are more than your sun sign, right? You have a moon sign. Well, what does that mean? That means that I have emotions and I have an ego. And then there's Mercury, and I'm like, okay, so what does that mean? That means that you have a gear in your brain that processes those information between your moon and your sun and helps you put those into words and helps you communicate those, or put them into writing, or put it into typing or whatever. And it helps you process that and spit it out. And that's where your voice comes from. And are you loud? Are you quiet? Are you effective at communicating? And so these are all things that just sitting down and seeing if it resonates with you or not was a process that helped me so much, that I really believe, because I had so many people help me, and I've talked so much about like success stories from like, oh, I was a runaway on the street and I was, around all these sketchy people, and somehow a very minimal amount of things happened considering what had happened to everyone around me. And I was able to, when I talked to helpers, when I found helpers, like social workers, things like that, programs, youth programs that were helping me, I was able to process what they were telling me, because I had so many tools at my disposal to already help me process how life works and how emotions work. And my peers, a lot of my peers who were in those same situations, could not process that the adults, who were trying to help were trying to tell us. And so, like, I was able to hear them because I had these tools, because I had, and that's what I believe. I also had, some decent advantages besides that as I was younger, so that, everything is relative. But I would also tell them when I would, go through these programs and stuff, and they knew I did a studied astrology, and I would tell them the same thing. I was like, reading these help my vocabulary. They help me process my emotions, because I don't look at it to tell me how I feel. I know how you know what I mean? I know I can figure that out for myself. And so, but it puts it into words where I'm like, do I like that? Do I not like that? Am I like that? And then it'll tell you the different results you might get from behaving like that or not, depending on who you're reading. That's why who you're reading is so important, from who you're getting information from is so important, because are they telling you information that's just scaring you about your life? Are they telling you information that's going to help you process information, that's going to give you a leg up, that's going to tell you how to deal with it? If you have a hard aspect or something that's difficult, is what you're reading telling you how, giving you suggestions on how to process that information? Too often I see things that are like, oh, this aspect, this thing means that somebody's going to die, or you're going to, so whatever it is. First of all, astrology is very, very complicated, and predicting things like death is a very, very complicated thing that I do not try. I did get into it a little bit, and I had to step away from it because there's people who, if you want to study it and it feels good to you and that's what you want to do, good for you. But like, I personally don't like to study death because I don't want to know. And so if someone is like, I'm going to teach you how to predict death, I'm going to be like, no, thank you. No, thank you. You can keep that knowledge. And so you want to make sure that you're picking and choosing the kind of information, right? But I will tell you that there's not one placement that will define you. Your sun sign is not going to be 100, right? It's a bunch of different pieces. And so it helps us really think about how layered we are, how complicated our brain functionings are, all the different planets. The personal planets represent different parts of your brain that actually exist and actually function the way that astrology suggests that they function. According to psychology, you can apply them. So those are all important things. So I found it to be so more positive. I know there is positive psychology, but there was something about Western medicine that is fundamentally broken in their approach. And I don't want to completely denounce it because, I still try to go to a therapist, but I'll tell you, it doesn't, or a counselor, but it's not helping me the way other resources are helping me. And that's just my personal thing. Some people it does. But I don't want to ramble on about that. So I definitely have always and still do approach information of divination with awareness, and I use my gut and my intuition to feel things out and make sure that it feels good for me, whether or not I want to continue pursuing that information or that person's information. And there's a lot of things I disagree with. All of the people that I mentioned, there's something they've said that I don't agree with. And every single astrologer, will have their biases. They're humans. Every single doctor you see is going to have a bias. Every single priest that you meet is going to have a bias. I know that Gandhi had biases. I know that Jesus had biases. We all do. We're human, okay? And so you want to keep that in mind and be compassionate with other people and their biases, or that they're not aware of. You want to be, but also, be able to let people know and call them out when they're not approaching things in a correct way, or they're not approaching ways in the most productive way. So that's always been my approach, and that's why it's been so freaking hard for me to pick a strict type of astrology or whatever, because I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to keep study everything, and then when I do a whole bunch of things and I start a bunch of charts and I notice this works, then that's what I go off of, and I learn for myself through practice. But I use the information and the techniques that I learned from other people. And I think that is the best way to go about it. If you want to be an astrologer, if you just want to practice for practical use, that's the best way to go about it, is to just, how can this information, I can apply it in a practical way to my life as a check sheet. Like the moon cycles, I'm doing a series on the moon cycles. So every time when the moon changes every 2.5 days. So you want to pay attention to that part of your body that sign represents. You want to pay attention to that part of your emotions or your part of and just do a check-in and be like, how is this area going? Am I ignoring it? Am I overemphasized on it? Am I utilizing this energy in the most productive way versus, because you have all the energies in you. You have Aries somewhere, you have Leo somewhere, you have Sagittarius somewhere, you have Cancer somewhere. It doesn't matter, all of them. You have them somewhere in you, even if it's intercepted. And so that is how astrology found me, and that is how I've been processing it. Now I will tell you that I'm going to do my Saturn return story, and it is going to blow your mind, because that is what I was like, okay, this is what it is for me. Like, this is what I'm doing. So your Saturn return happens between like 27 and 30. And usually around 29 is the exact degree of your Saturn return. There's tons of videos on the internet. The Divine Venus has some pretty recent good ones that you should watch. And I'm going to do a review online. We now have Saturn in Aquarius, so my Saturn return is now over. It ended in December of 2020, and I'm still processing it. So I'm going to get on here and try to explain and process that with all of you. And then I'm also going to make those videos about specific types of different astrologers. My battery's dying. So I think that's the universe saying it's time to cut it. Cut it. Thank you guys for coming and watching this whole long thing. I hope it's helpful. I hope that you found the information helpful, and I hope that it helps you on your journey and figure out if astrology is right for you to pursue or not. I would look into it more, and have a great, wonderful night or day, whatever time it is. Bye.